Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Gitcast podcast series with me, Gitbag, the Great. Slight mess up of the words there, but the show must go on. And as is usually the case, I'm here with the ever reliable Flash Presser.
Don't you mean Sash Flopessa?
Shut up. God, fucking. That's the thing. Like, I can't sort of solely blame it down on the fact that I've got mild autism, but the thing is, my brain processes information slower than my mouth is able to speak. So sometimes I just end up screwing up my words without really fully meaning to.
Don't worry about it. We all have that kind of thing. I feel like a bit of a pillock now for making fun of you there. Didn't sort of.
Don't worry about it. You've known I've had that autism for fucking years anyway. Like people.
Well, yeah, I never knew it sort of caused kind of a mild speech impediment thing.
It's not a speech impediment. It's literally just like it's primarily a sort of how do I describe it? It's more like a sort of a slight functional sort of impairment in that it affects the speed at which my brain processes information. It doesn't actually directly affect my speech or my vocal patterns at all, to be honest.
Okay, interesting.
In fact, actually, I mean, during my lower education years, I was actually one of the better readers and one of the better speakers out of my class. So, if anything, it didn't actually impact me at all in that way. But as always, with these podcasts, if you lovely people at home don't enjoy the gameplay in the background, by all means, feel free to put this podcast on in the background. Fuck! And go about your day while listening to our, I hope, soothing voices talk a stupendous amount of cobblers in the background. But, as always, how have you been since the last episode, Phil?
Well, I've been doing great, actually, thanks. Yeah, no, work is really enjoyable.
You're still doing
Been
it
having
at the
quite a lot
Lego
of fun.
place?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I'm working there. Likely will be for several months yet, at least. No, it's all been jolly nice. I tell you what, one thing that we can start off with immediately that I kind of forgot about is Lego's new plastic that they've kind of invented.
I only heard about that briefly. What's the difference between it and the old one?
Well, in terms of the structural integrity, heat resistance, and all the rest of it, there is none.
Oh, so it's just...
Lego refused to make any concessions regarding the quality of the brick. But basically, the plastic is one from cellulose that is left over after sugarcane has had all the sugar juice pressed out of it, rather than being made from oil. So it's fully biodegradable and non-toxic. Not that Lego bricks are normally toxic, but if plastic breaks down, it will be.
Yeah, and it's also, just generally a bit more efficient and beneficial to the environment to use leftover minerals to make your products.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so that's just really generally quite interesting. I really like it. Yeah, and the whole thing has just been quite fun. Like the new Harry Potter sets are out, so we all got these Harry Potter wands made of Lego that children could come and build themselves and all the rest of it.
Have they started selling...
The staff go around carrying them, we faff around with them, it's always fun.
Have they started selling any Ninjago sort of merchandise?
Oh, there's loads of that.
Oh, I'm sure. I still...
Yeah, no, Ninjago is an amazing thing. It first came out in 2011 when I did a little bit of work experience there when I was 15.
Is that
and
when
it's been going strong ever since. Nobody expected it to be that big.
Is that when the film came out, or is that just when that sub-series started up?
That's just when that little sort of theme started up. Yeah, the film came out like 2 years ago now. No, one year ago.
Oh yeah, because I remember actually seeing the film on the in-flight entertainment system when I was flying back from America last year. I will regret to say actually, even as a Lego enthusiast myself, I still haven't seen either the Lego movie, Lego Batman, or the Ninjago movie.
Goodness. Yeah, I saw the Lego Movie when it first came out in cinemas. It
Yeah,
was surprisingly good, and yeah, the people who wrote it are plainly very talented.
yeah,
I I haven't yet seen the Lego Batman movie, nor have I seen the Lego Ninjago movie.
yeah.
But my family bought me them for my birthday a few days ago now. Actually, a few weeks ago now. Gosh, time flies. Um, yeah, but unfortunately, we got a new telly recently, like a big flat screen thing, whereas before we had this sort of analog television.
Mm. And how has that
Yeah, so
improved your
but and
television
we didn't
viewing
have the
experience?
DVD player hooked up to that for ages, so I haven't been able to watch them yet.
How has that improved your television viewing experience?
Oh, it's improved it massively. I mean, I like the old telly. Oh heck,
Yeah, you're not going to last long against that. It's a Tier 9
no,
heavy
I
tank.
lost everything.
Yeah. Um, yeah, those Chinese Tier 9s tend to have horrible side armour, but they are quite powerful from the front.
Yeah, I didn't realise that everyone else near me had been destroyed or had pulled back. But yeah, no, it's quite an amazing difference. I mean, normally you can sort of, you're always aware that you're watching something on a screen that is being lit up by lots of little pixels.
Mm,
Whereas with this new telly, it's like you're looking through a window and actually seeing the stuff.
yeah.
It's really quite amazing.
And does this affect any particular type of visual media, be it TV shows, films, cartoons, or that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'd say it particularly affects fully computer animated shows. We tested out the DVD player last night
Mm.
with the Star Wars: The Clone Wars series.
Yeah,
It's just a few seconds of that, and instantly the textures are so much sharper. Because I'd only ever watched it on sort of rubbish old telly or on my little laptop.
yeah.
But here it was just so amazing how detailed all the texture packs were. It was really quite amazing. It was just beautiful. And yeah, I can imagine that something like that, films like Star Wars, films that are good to watch in the cinema with big space battles, lots of moving bits, are going to be quite interesting to watch in that particular format.
And especially something I would imagine that's not necessarily traditional style animation like the Lego movies would be also quite good in that format.
Yes, I'm sure. No, well, the Lego Movie thing, even though it is well, apart from the live action segments, it is entirely CGI.
Mm.
It's made to look like a Lego stop motion thing with a low frame rate and these sort of jerky movements.
Yeah.
And all the sort of, for lack of a better word, Lego pieces are animated to look like Lego, like they've been scuffed and all the rest of it
Yeah.
scratched. So it probably would look quite amazing.
Actually, I was going to say, sorry, it's become so popular, that sub franchise now, that they ended up getting the two main characters from the Lego movie to star in a Turkish Airlines safety
Yes,
video.
I've seen that. That was amazing.
It was bizarre, but it was quite funny. It was like when I do quite like it when air because I love flying, so I really appreciate when uh, airplane companies sort of like, or flying companies get creative for their flying safety videos. Like when a couple of years ago, and I saw you haven't got any inscriptions on your tile. God, fucking damn it!
Yeah, I do.
No, where?
Don't I?
No, you don't.
That's weird. Normally I have fireball written in large letters. Or maybe it's because I don't have a camo thing for this one for winter.
No, I'm talking about the inscriptions, not the camo.
Yeah, I know, but I got inscriptions as well, and I saw them just
Maybe
now before we.
maybe you just got them temporarily.
No, I bought them with gold deliberately.
Did you? Oh, weird. What? I can't see them.
That is weird. No, I mean I literally just now before you clicked start, I saw them there, and I've always had the same inscription on it for the past like year or so.
Maybe you need to like re-put them on. I mean, they did recently release a small update for the game, so.
Yeah, maybe it's just a temporary thing.
So.
I need to buy some winter camo for this thing anyway, but there we go.
So. What was I just going to say? So and then I think it was a couple of years ago actually. I was watching a British Airways flight safety video, and
Oh yes, the British Airways one from a couple. That was brilliant. I was about to mention that one actually. Yeah.
are you thinking of the same one I'm thinking of? Because the one I'm thinking of is where they get like a cute little kids in like uh, uh, air sort of like host sort of like uniforms to like demonstrate the sort of all the sort of things in the safety video to you, and it's I don't like children, but it's quite adorable.
No, that's a different one. I was thinking of the one where they did all these international scenes, sort of making fun of stereotypes, kind of thing.
Oh right,
They did one like Scottish, English, Chinese, all the rest of it.
that sounds bizarre. That sounds like something that
It was bizarre, but it was kind of funny, and it wasn't offensive in any way.
I know that just sounds like something that really wouldn't fly in this PC centric world these days.
Yeah, well, I made it sound worse than it was just there.
Yeah,
To be honest.
I mean, yeah, it probably is like one of those things I do need to see for myself more so than hear someone describe it, because the way you described it made it sound pretty
Yeah,
bad.
it sounded like they were sort of
It's like, oh yes,
going on about Chinese No, no, it wasn't that. It was sort of like they were showing all the different places they could fly to,
yeah, and not
and they cleverly tied it all into the safety video.
yeah, and not so much like say, oh yes, look at those poppycock Scotsmen. Oh yes, indeed. Oh, the Chinese. Oh, what a dashing bunch, or just shit like that.
No, no, well, not quite that.
No, it's. You'll have to send me a link to that because I don't think I've actually seen that one.
I'll see if I can find it again. But yeah, no, the airlines quite often do fairly interesting, creative things, don't they? Mainly
Yeah.
because they have the money.
I'm trying to remember this one. I think it was one that Pyrocynical once took the piss out of in one of his older videos on YouTube, where this airline used a bunch of memes to get across their sort of safety precautions. And I was just like, it's just bad. It's just not
Yeah.
even slightly funny.
Well, do you remember? Here's a slightly different thing. When Emirates Airlines,
Yeah.
known for having the most attractive stewardesses,
Yes.
got them all to dance the safety demo,
I-
sort of like cheerleaders to sort of pop music kind of thing.
What? I don't think I've seen that one. The one I've seen recently from Emirates was.
And I don't just mean they made a film of that. I mean they had them do that on every flight. As the safety demo.
Really?
Yeah, that happened.
Because I went to Sri Lanka early last year, and it was a two-legged flight, and part of the way we flew with Emirates, me and my mum, and I don't remember them doing that.
No, I think this was years ago.
Yeah, it must be. That sounds
No,
fucking.
they must have changed it. I think it was Emirates. It was one of the sort of Middle Eastern airlines anyway.
That sounds fucking bizarre.
There is video of it online, and I have seen it,
That is.
and it is bizarre. But it's not quite. Actually, it's a bit more bizarre than this one. Lufthansa. This isn't the safety demo, but it was an advert they had.
Oh god.
I think they ran it in Britain. It was a couple of years ago, just I think. And they had two English blokes whose flight had got cancelled, but they were rebooked on Lufthansa.
Yeah.
And it cut to them imagining what Lufthansa would be like, and it was full of all these German stereotypes.
Yeah.
Like the stewardesses were sort of the waitresses from the Oktoberfest, and there was swilling beer and eating bretzels, and there was the German folk music on in the background.
Yeah.
And then they sort of have them go on the plane, and everything's sort of crisp and efficient,
Yeah.
rather than the sort of boisterous imagery that they had before. It was a rather strange choice, but it was okay. It was funny. Once again, it's a fun use of stereotypes rather than relying on them for the humour in their own right. Basically,
Yeah.
it's making fun of the stereotypes themselves rather than the people on whom the stereotypes are based.
Yeah. That's the proper way to do it. don't make
Yeah.
it out of like mean-spiritedness.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Besides, I think you can be allowed some leeway when you're making fun of your own stereotypes.
yeah, it was just like
Sort of
why?
like when I make fun of Scottish stereotypes, or you make fun of Polish or London ones.
Yeah, no, it's I do sort of like get really annoyed when people say like, oh, you can't say that that sort of group of people. Like someone said to me once, like, oh, you can't make that stereotype about English people, and I just said to them, well, sorry, but I am English. I think I'm allowed a bit of leeway there. It's not like I'm insulting an entire different sort of like race or country altogether.
Yeah,
Um, and stereotypes to a certain degree are based on some small kernel of truth.
yeah, no, I would have to agree with that. I mean, there's usually a reason for them, but I tell you what, there's a great song. Do you know the YouTube musician, techno musician? They call themselves this sort of band. They call themselves Your Favorite Martian. They were quite big a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I used to watch them quite a bit. I haven't watched
Yeah, they
them for
had the
years.
Stereotype song.
I fucking hated that song.
Did you? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I appreciated what they were going for. It was like quite an interesting sort of like message, but just like on a purely technical basis, it's a fucking shite tune.
Yeah, that's true. It is sort of one of those ones that sticks in your head because it's quite annoying. It's sort of
Yeah.
like, I don't know, Crazy Frog. Do you remember Crazy Frog?
I try not
That
to.
weird one where they had this horrible early 2000s
Yes,
CGI animated
I
frog
know,
bouncing
Phil. I
around.
try not to.
Okay, alright, so I didn't hear
Just
that.
God, that fucking thing was everywhere for like 2 years. It's like everyone had it as the ringtone on their crappy little flip phones when I was a kid. It drove me ape shit. Fuck, I hated that shit. I also hated God, there was another one that came out after it. I can't remember what it was, but it was similarly grasping at the ears.
Hmm.
Yeah, no,
No, I don't remember that one. I tell you what, I do remember, probably as a result of being at school in Germany in the early 2000s,
yeah.
is 99 red balloons. In German, 99 Luftballons.
What the fuck is that?
Have you not heard it? It was so big everywhere in the late 90s, early 2000s.
I don't think I have.
Look it up. It is this really kind of surreal song, but yeah, it's okay. It's not terrible.
Oh god, actually
It's
no.
just one of those songs that was popular in the 90s and would never be popular in any other time period.
Actually, speaking of like early 2000s techno, like ringtone sort of viral video music shit, I remember the Gummy Bear.
Oh
Song.
gosh, yes, I remember that.
That made me want to just peel my skin off. It was so aggravatingly annoying, and my friends used to play it on their phones to me just to intentionally piss me off. I tell you, there were many beatings back then.
Gosh, that was unexpectedly dark.
No, it wasn't.
You'd always
It was
remind
fully
yourself with
deserved.
the
It was fully deserved because they never knew the pain they were causing. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just saying you could always either distract yourself or get them back by playing the Disney Gummy Bears TV show theme tune.
No.
No?
Well, actually, no. That theme. Wait, do you mean the one that goes Gummy Bears bouncing here and there and
Everywhere.
Yeah, that one's actually.
Yeah, that one.
That's not a bad song though.
No, it's not. That's why you would sort of be able to distract yourself with it.
What the Phil? Look at that Centurion. Let's look at that FV.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that earlier. What is that?
Why? Oh, it's custom sort of camouflage. I forgot they recently.
Oh, right, okay.
I forgot they've recently started introducing that. It's just like he looks like the Green Goblin's pincushion. Jesus.
Yeah, that is so weird. I mean, the bottom bit is vomit coloured. The top part looks sort of like a Victoria plum, and the long sticky out bit looks Long sticky. I mean, the gun barrel.
Are
God,
you fucking serious? The
the
long,
gun barrel.
the long
It's sort of
sticky
mucus
out
green.
bit. You took the piss out of my fucking mushed up English earlier. The stick. I'm going to be remembering that for fucking years. The long sticky out bit.
God. I don't know
Jesus
what came over me with that one.
Christ. Oh fuck. Yeah. Christ, I'm going to be remembering that for a long time. Well, actually, speaking of long sticky out bits and well to tanks, I guess we should move on to the first like proper topic that I had in mind actually, which was the recent rescheduling and reworking of the uh, Your Captain competition in World of Warships, which for many who don't know was a competition recently set up whereby community contributors for EU World of Warships community were tasked with creating a certain sort of kind of video and submitting it to the World of Warships channel um, in order to get a chance at being placed into World of Warships as a limited time premium captain. Now, there was a number of sort of like different parameters and sort of like quantifiers as to how the winner would be chosen. And while Wargaming, to their credit, tried to make it as fair as possible, it turned out the way they had done it was actually fairly imbalanced. And many people were criticising them because of the fact that it didn't take into account community contributors who didn't have YouTube or live streams or podcasts and only just did like blogs. It also didn't take into account the fact that it would, for some weird reason, overly favour smaller contributors. Like, people looked at the numbers and realised that people like the Mighty Jingles had a very slim chance of even getting close to winning it. So what they've done is they've postponed it by about another, I believe, 1 to 1.5 months, and they've reworked the rules a bit. I can't remember them off by heart, but it seems to be a little bit more balanced towards a more comprehensive range of like community contributors from different platforms as well. So, and I saw it on Twitter recently when Rita Gamer shared it, and I think everyone agreed, like, look, it's not perfect, but at least Wargaming took notice.
Yeah, well, that sounds like it was a sort of well-resolved thing in the end.
I think this situation as well, like, sort of highlights something to me that is more prevalent about Wargaming, and in particular the World of Warships sort of team, than most other sort of video game companies that people care to notice. And that is that they are more willing to listen to community feedback, criticism, and their own community contributors than a number of other video game companies are, as in, I would say, Ubisoft or EA to a certain extent, Konami most certainly. Oh fuck! Why did I do that?
Yeah, and of course EA being the obvious example that everyone wants to
I would say
kick while it's down.
I would say probably like Ubisoft and Konami are the worst currently, but EA are pretty bad. But
Yeah,
and I kind of said this in a reply to Rita Gamer on Twitter that while I don't certainly agree with everything that Wargaming do, and while I can't always defend them, I will still maintain that they are not the worst by a long shot, that people do sometimes overstate their downcomings, and that there is certainly a lot of major games companies that are way, way worse than them. And it's like even the Wargaming sort of like PR team for World of Tanks, which is notoriously clunky in their handling of certain situations in the past, I'd still take them over like the equivalent sort of teams for equivalent developer and PR teams for Ubisoft and especially Konami. Again, they're not perfect. They've done a lot of things wrong in the past. There's still a lot of things they have to improve on, but they're still miles better. And I do feel like when people criticise them, they overstate certain criticisms to the point where it kind of invalidates the more genuine and more pressing concerns that people have about the games that Wargaming are producing and supporting.
Yes, I agree. I mean, this isn't the first time we've praised Wargaming for its responsiveness to the community. I mean, I think we talked a little bit about that back when we had the whole preferential matchmaking thing in World of Tanks.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it a little bit as well last year when there was that whole situation about Sir Foch and Circumflexes. Although I think that was a little bit more briefly because by the time we'd gotten around to it, Mighty Jingles, Rita Gamer, and a bunch of other internet celebs had already comprehensively resolved or at least tried to resolve the situation. And I don't want people to think like me and Flash Suppressor are just arse kissers of Wargaming, because I think there's definitely some things we don't comprehensively like about the way they do certain things. I still can't fully forgive the reworkings on certain tank destroyers, or the messing up they did with the selling of the Chrysler GF and the Defender, or the implementation of some of the flags and some of the way that some of the flags and the camos in Warships are implemented. Although they've, since then resolved many of those issues to what I would say is a more than satisfactory degree. And the thing is, I feel as well that being a perfect games company is kind of one of those zen things that's, I think, something every game company should try and do their best to achieve. But let's face it, it's impossible, because you're never going to please everyone. And I feel like in a lot of cases, in sort of approaching a sort of an issue with a certain solution, you're probably going to end up opening up one or two more issues. So I feel like it's kind of a lose-lose situation for people like Wargaming, because, well, I don't know, they kind of they won't be able to please everyone, and they will just have to sort of compromise on certain things sometimes. Like I think the reworkings there recently of the Your Captain sort of competition isn't perfect, but it's still better than what they had before.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have some issues with Wargaming as well. Like, I think particularly on World of Tanks, there is just a little bit of an imbalance in the matchmaking a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Particularly, certain heavy tanks are a bit overpowered. Sometimes that can be fun, but then you need to sort of be able to balance it out a little bit.
Yeah.
And also, I think that there's an excessive amount of grinding that is done. And I think there's a very, very sudden halt in the game progression that you can progress in quite quickly, because you progress from tier 1 to tier 5 in World of Tanks really fast without needing to spend money.
I think
but everything after that takes you ages.
I think the thing is, I think the amount of progression, in my opinion, only needs to be decreased a small bit, but I think the main thing is like the progression curve. I think it should take slightly longer to get from tier 1 to tier 5, and maybe about 10% longer, and then 10% less time to get from tier 5 to tier 10.
Yeah, that might make sense.
Although, personally for me, the main thing I have issues with in terms of the mechanics of the game at the moment is what we talked about last time. We talked about something controversial in World of Tanks, which is the issue around preferential matchmaking, and also the general matchmaking spread. For me personally, that's the biggest technical issue right now.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, we've got, in this match, we've got tier 9s going up against tier 7s.
Which I don't mind so much, because it is a tier 2 sort of matchmaking spread, and we're not in preferential tanks, but I think, I don't know, there could be more tier 7s in this game. I don't mind there being tier 9s, but some of the ones we'd have to go up against would be quite monstrous, like the Object 705 and like the MX-30. We're able to penetrate those things, but they're vastly more powerful than we are. Although again, I guess I can't complain because some tier 9s and 10s are more than capable of being destroyed by tanks like us. But I guess like if we came across something like an E100, what the for fuck's sake, Phil. But if we came across something like an E100, then we'd be screwed.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So sorry, but what the fuck just happened with you?
I don't know. I don't know what happened. I didn't mean to go over the edge. It isn't even the case this time where, like, I thought it was a gentle slope. I literally wanted to move forward, see if I could spot anyone, then quickly move back. And I went off the accelerator. I can only assume I braked too late, and I just went right over the edge.
Yeah. I had a bit of a shoddy game myself as well. Though, to be fair, at least your death was funny.
Yeah, that's true. My death was funny. It had screen value, yep.
So, is there anything else you think you want to add to that, like, conversation about, like, wargaming and their attempts to, like, tackle controversial situations?
Only to say that I think the fact that they are a bit more of a federated company, like each area has its own sort of management and has a bit of autonomy to it, probably helps a lot compared to a company such as Nintendo, where one central management system calls all the shots, which is probably going to be a lot less flexible and have a lot less success in tackling issues when they do arise. Like the whole thing with the Nintendo Life thing. I think it was called Life, or something where you could create your own persona and interact with other people online. It was basically like The Sims for Nintendo.
Sounds just delightful.
Yeah, no, I hate The Sims, and I hate sort of Nintendo's grindy games like Animal Crossing and all the rest of it.
Do you really not like the Animal Crossing games?
No, I don't. I don't like games that don't have a real story. I don't like that style of. I don't like that aesthetic. I don't like the sort of large bobble-headed animal creature kind of thing they got going on. I don't understand why Hello Kitty is so popular. I've yet to watch the Toys That Made Us documentary episode on Hello Kitty. I've mostly been watching the episodes about G.I. Joe, He-Man, Lego, Transformers, all that kind of thing. Star Trek toys, Star Wars toys.
Yeah.
Where all that went.
I'm trying to think what I don't like about Disney. I think probably... I think probably the extent to which some of their more recent sort of modern animation films get praised, because they're all decent, but it's just like I do feel like sometimes it goes a bit overboard. And I also, especially the Wreck-It Ralph films, I just don't think they're that good.
The Wreck-It Ralph films?
Yeah.
Oh, what, we're moving on to the Disney things?
No, I'm just mentioning that offhand, just quickly, because I thought it would be good to move on to our film reviews that we were planning, but I just don't like. Maybe I'm being a bit of an old codger, but like I just feel a bit more at home with the style of animation that Disney were pursuing in the 90s. I guess you can't really blame them too much because they have to kind of adapt with the times, and it's only natural progression that they kind of follow to a certain degree what other companies were doing. But
yeah, definitely. I mean, to be fair, you can see where the profit lies, can't you? I mean, a good example would be Disney's two films, Tangled and The Princess and the Frog, that they brought out.
Yeah, which, to be fair, are
pretty much the same time. The Princess and the Frog being mostly traditional animation, or at least had the look of traditional animation, whereas Tangled was, full on CGI like most of the modern Disney fairy tale films.
Yeah.
And I think what a lot of people said, and I think the Nostalgia Critic said this at some point too. He said that there are a lot of reasons why Princess and the Frog didn't do so well, including having sort of more niche music and various other things. But the main thing probably is the fact that adults just aren't as drawn to the old-fashioned style of animation because they think it's sort of denoting something more childish.
Mm.
And there's also, to the uninitiated, to the uninformed, it looks a little bit cheaper.
Yeah.
Like it was lower quality and easier to do, which of course it wasn't, but
And
that's just how people think.
I also think it's in a little part down to something else, which is oversaturation. Because you think about the amount of animated films that Disney are pumping out each year
Yeah,
nowadays. 2D films will get a chance if they're done well enough and they're publicised well enough, but otherwise it's really hard for them to sort of struggle up the hill to get to the plateau of profitability. And this kind of relates into what I was wanting to go into next, regarding their, for the last few years, production of the Marvel superhero films, um, which I believe are probably the most pertinent example of them oversaturating a certain part of the film market, or just their general media productions. And to start off with, I think just want to like review a couple of the films they released in the last couple of years. Most recently, of course, being Ant-Man and the Wasp, the sequel to Ant-Man, which came out I think about 3 years ago now.
yes, I think so.
I actually took myself to see it recently, but I didn't realise until just after I'd seen it that you've also recently seen it with your sister, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, Susanna and I went to see it.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah, we like going to the cinema together. It's one of the things that sort of we like doing because we're both into film and animation.
yeah. Now, I'll just give like a very brief spoiler warning. I don't know if we'll end up spoiling anything like major, but just in case.
Yeah.
So, generally speaking, what did you think of it, and how do you think it compared to the first film?
Um, I thought it was good. I liked it. I mean, I've yet to see a Marvel film sort of from the current crop of MCU films that is actually bad.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there was that much to recommend it. I don't think it was as funny as the original. I don't think that it is as sort of creative. I don't think it was as well thought out. As far as the main draw for these films, obviously, is the sort of fight choreography on the sort of nanoscale.
Yeah.
And the way that shifting in size and flying around gives you all these extra dimensions to work with. And in this particular case, I just don't think they used that as much as they did in the first one. They plainly went all out for the final action chase sequence,
Yeah.
but otherwise they didn't. And there wasn't really quite as much fun. Like the final battle in the first one being this fight on a Thomas the Tank Engine train set with everything constantly shifting in size. That was really fun and really creative.
It's yeah, I do get like the feeling that while the action in this film wasn't perhaps as bad as I thought it would be, I think it was perhaps a little bit it was perhaps a little bit lacking. It was a little bit light on the ground, and I think it sort of tried to recycle the sort of some of the certain sort of themes of the action that were in the first film.
Yeah.
And I can kind of see why they did that, because particularly the parts in the first film where uh, Ant-Man goes into the quantum zone, they're reused for certain parts of the second film's action scenes, and to a very good extent as well. And I can't really sort of fault them for doing that, because it's a very interesting visual environment, that part of the film. But they do seem to rely on it quite a lot. Now, to be fair, this is in large part because it ties in greatly into the meat of the story and one of the central sort of central sort of story points. But they additionally to sort of perhaps slightly over relying on that setting, they also have the added sort of issue, I think, of there not really being all that much happening in the film in terms of action. Now, we've certainly seen sort of MCU films do this before. I remember, like, the first Iron Man film actually doesn't have all that much action in it at all, but it's a very entertaining film because of that, because it is a still very paced, very well sort of like coordinated and very well sort of paced and sort of concise sort of film. It doesn't try to do anything more than it's there for, and I don't feel like they did that with the second Ant-Man film. I feel like it kind of overstayed its welcome, and there wasn't enough action to fill in the holes where there was long periods of little happening, and they kind of just over-explained things at points, I thought. Which was particularly galling because, in my personal opinion, I don't think they really gave that much of a toss about the backstory of the main villain, which for me was one of the weaker parts of the film.
Yeah, so that's one of the points where we kind of disagreed. I do think they should have spent more time on the main villain of it, but I do think they came up with a good cure for Marvel's long-running problem of having these throwaway villains. Namely, they had essentially two different villains, one of whom was complex and interesting, the other was sort of an irredeemable villain who didn't really have much characterization and was basically used as comic relief in the end.
Yeah.
So you kind of had the best of both worlds. You had an interesting villain who is going to come back, and you had a satisfactory story conclusion with some comic relief afterwards.
I still feel like the thing is, it's kind of a weird double-edged sword, because if they had sort of like just used the main villain in the film as they had done in the previous movies, it would have been a more effective initial impact, and it would have been a more magnanimous sort of more impactful. I don't know why I said magnanimous, but a more sort of a striking performance. But then again, they would have obviously ended up killing them off at the end, and it would have just been another throwaway villain like Thanos, or
yeah.
Oh no, sorry, not Thanos.
Yeah, no.
What's the guy from the first Guardians of the Galaxy film?
Ronan.
Ronan, yeah, Ronan the Accuser. Fantastic villain, really well played, and just kind of felt like a bit of a veritable thud because he was only there for one film. And I'm kind of glad they do this with this villain here, because she's an interesting enough villain that I think there's a lot more room which she can improve and become maybe sort of like not necessarily a full-on villain, but an anti-hero. But still, I think in the individual story of this film, just on its own, her presence was a bit weak and kind of just not really all that impactful. And I don't really feel like I got my money's worth for what I wanted out of a superhero film villain. The potential for future films is exceptional, so I guess it's kind of a trade-off to a certain extent.
Yes.
Like, do you want the better film villain for the film itself, or for the franchise as a whole? But then I have to sort of contend with the point that I have mentioned earlier, that I think these kind of films are getting a bit oversaturated, and they're releasing a bit too many of them per year. I mean, it's kind of the opposite though with a film that you saw recently in regards to the MCU film universe, of course, with that being Doctor Strange, which came out a little while ago and I'd already seen, but you only saw recently, right?
Yes, I only saw it yesterday because it was on Netflix. It was one of the Marvel films that I didn't really watch, again, because of the oversaturation that you're talking about.
But even though it's actually one of the better MCU films, I would say, in part because of great casting, and also because I think it's actually one of the better ones at doing away with the issues of being too light-hearted.
It was grim in some places.
Yeah, and having sort of just a throwaway villain for the sake of it. This villain, I feel, again, spoiler warnings, I feel like it'd be very difficult to bring back the villain for from.
Sorry. Before you go on, which villain are you thinking of? Are you thinking of like the human villain or the monstrous villain Dormammu?
The monstrous villain. I think that it'd be tricky. It'd be tricky to bring him back, but it is certainly possible. And so, like, while it is hard to bring him back, they have at least left the door open to sort of the possibility of him coming back. And even if it does tend out to be a one-off throwaway villain, they at least made it one of the more interesting ones and didn't make it feel like it was just a thudding, sort of just boring sort of throwaway villain. Hello?
Yeah, sorry, I was just concentrating on the game for a moment there. I know that's not really what this is about, but there was just one. Never mind. Yeah, no, I'd agree with that one. But I think that with Doctor Strange, first of all, you're right that it is great casting. I think Benedict Cumberbatch was the perfect choice. I'm not normally a fan of his acting. I don't really like the Sherlock TV series.
I've never watched it.
Wasn't really that enthused about his performance as Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was perfect. He played it well. My problem, though, is the human villain played by Mads Mikkelsen is so throwaway. I mean, his conflict is the same as... It's like Anakin Skywalker from the prequel trilogy. It's like any number of other... It's like it's Kung Fu Panda, basically. Isn't it? He's Tai Lung from Kung Fu Panda. The only reason that the villain is at all interesting is because he's played by Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so that was my thoughts on it. I thought the animation was okay. It's interesting. It's an interesting depiction of a magic system, and I think it fits well with the Marvel Universe, because I wasn't quite sure how they do that, given that the Marvel Universe, up until that point, has tried to pass some things off as pseudoscience rather than magic. Whereas here they did full on say that it was magic, but they explained it well enough to sort of say how it worked, so that was fine.
Yeah, that's the thing as well, actually. Like, magic has the potentiality to just ruin the sort of suspense of the film that it's presented in, but they managed to keep it in Doctor Strange.
Yeah, definitely.
As the central sort of sort of core around whatever was happening in the story, but in a sort of a believable and sort of reasonable way where it didn't ruin the story or the basis of the narrative. And that's why, even despite it coming in a year of oversaturation, I do still think it's one of the films in the MCU universe that's more deserving of praise and recommendation because of how well the writing and narrative is handled.
Yeah, definitely. I think so as well. I mean, the conflict in and of itself is interesting, and I mean, it's been done before. Do you sacrifice the principles of an organization to achieve the goals of an organization?
Yeah,
that sort of thing. That's interesting. It's been done before, but it's always worth exploring again. And yeah, as I say, the acting was okay. There were some interesting casting choices that I quite liked. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me a lot of the video that Overly Sarcastic Productions did on the use of magic systems in a story.
Yeah.
And how they can sort of move from being fairly hard to being fairly loose. Like, if Lord of the Rings is an extremely loose magic system that you can play around with a lot, that has a lot of potential to sort of be shaped for the sake of plot convenience, then Harry Potter is somewhere in the middle, where there is a system to it, and it's clearly explained, but there's still the potential for a lot of plot holes because there are always going to be twists, and the magic is not that serious. And then you have something like Doctor Strange, where there are some very firm limitations for what the magic can do. It's explained very clearly right at the beginning, and there's a payoff for everything at the end.
I
But
would.
on the other hand, that makes the whole thing somewhat predictable for
I,
how it's going to turn out. So there's always a trade-off.
I would have slightly disagreed in the sense that I would have said like Lord of the Rings is at the sort of looser end, then Doctor Strange is in the middle, and Harry Potter is at the very top of being strict with its rules of magic, because there's some very severe guidelines about how magic and how the society of magic works in Harry Potter. And while it's certainly detailed out very strictly in the comics of Doctor Strange, I think they sort of loosen it up for the sake of storytelling in the film, and as a result, I don't see it being as strict as the Harry Potter films.
That may be the case. Maybe it's the case that because you actually read the Harry Potter books?
I think I read the first couple of ones. It's been so long. I couldn't really get into properly reading the books though. I was always more into the films and the audio tapes.
Hmm. I suppose that's fair, but yeah, no, I was. I mean, things change a bit in the later books, and the magic becomes a bit more sort of explained.
Yeah,
But it's very obvious that the magic is shaped by the needs of the plot in Harry Potter.
yeah,
Like all the rules about how wands interact, the rules about how Horcruxes work,
yeah. I
the
think
rules about divination and how that works and how the prophecy comes to be. It's all a bit metaphysical.
I think that's the
Whereas in
better way
Doctor
to do it.
Strange, it's very much you can manipulate these energy fields and the code of the universe, which has been written down by ancient. I mean, Doctor Strange isn't the first sort of film series, comic book storyline, whatever, to use that kind of logic that magic is sort of some fundamental principle of the universe that is understandable and real. And that's sort of the theme, isn't it? That there's little difference between magic and science, and that's something that all the Marvel films carry over. Thor, in particular, does it.
Yeah. Still,
Yeah,
I do think though, whether or not it's a film that I feel very passionately about, like Doctor Strange, or that I would just give sort of like a generally passing recommendation to, like the second Ant-Man film. I
yeah.
do feel like there is a significant problem facing us at the moment with the films that Disney are putting out at the moment, because the number of superhero animated films they put out every year is becoming quite saturated, and
Yes.
I think it's quite hard to enjoy the individual brilliance of each film when there's so many coming out, and you start to notice more consistent trends and similarities between them, and just generally speaking, you get more tired. And
That
let's
is true.
let's not forget, like, not everyone has disposable income. There's like people on the lowest income who might not be able to see half these films,
Yeah.
possibly even more at the cinema. And I just feel like because of that, some of these films won't get the viewership that they deserve because they're being so overly saturated that people either will just be too tired to see them, or some people just won't be able to afford to see all of them in one year. By which
Yeah.
time the availability and popularity of them will have decreased somewhat.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one sort of example, and one other thing that I just thought of is in terms of the money that they can make from these films. I wonder whether they might not shoot themselves in the foot, particularly because so much money from films, from blockbuster films like this, these days comes from merchandising and so on.
Yeah,
And why would people buy, the Doctor Strange merchandise when it's not really going to be a classic in its own right in like a few years' time? I mean, sure, maybe like Avengers Assemble will always be a classic,
yeah,
but the films that build it up and the films that build up the second Avengers film and then, of course, Infinity War, they aren't going to be classics. They're not going to be remembered in the same way.
no,
We'll be able to buy a box set of all the Marvel films in 30 years' time. and one of them will be much like another. That's what people will think. And with the merchandising, I think it's very telling that for films like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or whatever, toy companies bring out loads and loads of toys for every different scene or vehicle or character or whatever. And for the Marvel films, there's basically one kind of toy for each film.
Yeah, or like one set of like toys for each film, and it's not really based around a certain set piece, so to speak. Like,
No.
I remember, the big plastic set piece around the around like two different scenes of the big battle near the end of Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, and that's just two sort of sections of essentially the same scene.
Yeah.
That have their own toys, and it's because they are sort of genuinely iconic moments in that franchise that are that you would say are deserving of that sort of representation. And I don't get that feeling with many of these MCU films. Like, a lot of them are quite sort of oversaturated, and as a result they don't have enough attention paid to them to have any really genuinely iconic sort of set pieces. Even the more iconic and sort of like memorable films in the MCU, like the first Iron Man, like the first Captain America, like the first Avengers, like Spider-Man: Homecoming, or the second Captain America film.
Yeah.
They just don't have like the same pulling power as like films like yesteryear do.
I tell you what, like, I think it's particularly noticeable with the Lego things, and I swear I'm not getting paid to do this, and I would be talking about Lego even if I weren't working for them.
Well, look, it's like...
want to get that out of the way right now.
It's like, at the moment, I don't think I would probably have a chance to do it right now because I'm currently working for Waitrose. Like,
yeah,
I mean, I like their stuff, but you wouldn't hear me just like well, okay, actually, you probably would hear me constantly saying how nice their sandwiches are, but the point is, I'm not being sponsored by them either, so you can feel free to talk about them however you want.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm just thinking, because this is such a perfect example, like, let's not even count Lego Star Wars, because Star Wars is just warps the data completely. But say, like, the Lego Jurassic World and Jurassic Park sets.
Yeah.
There's about 6 or more, so there's a whole standard, like, theme running for a year or so of the Jurassic World sets for the new Jurassic World film.
Yeah.
But for things like Doctor Strange or the new Ant-Man and the Wasp film, they're lucky if they get one Lego set.
And the thing is as well, it's like I
mean, think about it. Like, if the Marvel films were like any other, then in the first Captain America film, there'd be a scene of the plane, the Hydra bomber. There'd be a set with the sort of flying missiles. There'd be a set with that weird car. There'd be a set with the gigantic tank that he fights in that 1 5-second clip.
There'd also be one with like him at the training ground at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, exactly.
But
for these ones, they just can't afford to do that because they're there and they're gone. There's no staying power. There's no profit in making loads of merchandising for these films.
I also just don't feel like there's as much passion put into big blockbusters these days as there was, say, either during the 80s or during the early 2010s, during the two more recent golden periods of like big scale blockbusters. I really worry that like we're going to go back to like the dark ages essentially of like the mid to late 90s where we had just shit like the Godzilla remake
or After Earth.
Yeah, or
wait, not After Earth.
After
sorry,
Earth
what's
yeah,
what's that one with all the weird Dutch angles?
Battlefield Earth.
Battlefield Earth, thank you. Yeah.
Where you've got Rastafarian alien John Travolta, and it's also based on a book by L. Ron Hubbard, and it's also based on mythology from the cult of Scientology.
Yeah, goodness me. I was surprised I didn't have Tom Cruise in there. But anyway, Yeah, I mean, or like the second and third Mission Impossible films. That
Yeah,
kind of stuff. Like, that's another good one. I've never seen a Mission Impossible film in my life, but I can tell that at the moment they're sort of bringing them back, and it's not really justified.
yeah, like I would have been fine with just leaving it at the first two. The third one was alright actually, but like the first two would have been just fine. And like, I think there was a period of like, say, I think when blockbusters started to regain their feet. I think the best period for blockbusters and action films is probably the 80s. And I think there was probably a period where it had a resurgence to a certain extent from the late 90s, the end of the 90s up until I'd say probably 2012ish. And that was, the golden period in which we had like the Blade films, the first sort of generation of the MCU films, and a whole slew of other cracking movies. The first two Expendables, and I just don't get the same feeling about action movies and big blockbusters from, let's say, like 1998 to 2012, or from the 1980s, as I do from ones that have been released over like the last 5 years as of now. I don't feel like I can remember them as much, or I'll enjoy them as much, on average, based to
True,
the sort of time periods that I just mentioned.
that's true, but bear in mind the possibility of survivorship bias, which is that we automatically think that things were better in the past because we only remember the better ones, is the gist of it. Like, we think 80s pop music was so much better than modern sort of popular music just because, we only remember the one-hit wonders. We only remember ABBA and so on. Like, we only remember the ones that did survive.
Yeah.
You don't remember all the ones that died by the wayside and who produced terrible music that was rightly criticised. And the same with films, I think. There are so many terrible films from that era that aren't even memorable. Complete, rip-offs of Star Wars, things like, The Black Hole or whatever, that people won't really care about in the future. People didn't care about 2 years later. But I do think that, whatever format it is, the Marvel films are more memorable than most of that. Granted, we'll probably see them in box sets alongside Dad's Army and HMV in 20 years' time. But the fact that they are there is what's important.
Well, I was going to say, will HMV even still be around by that point?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure.
Actually, although they might have moved on to a purely digital format by that point, because that's what I think.
That's possible. I mean, yeah.
If they're not too stubborn, because like high street sort of retail shops with sort of that kind of output are slowly being killed off. I mean, there are a few that are sort of like staying strong and surviving, like CEX and stuff. Ones that buy sort of like second-hand stuff and resell it. But yeah.
No, I mean, things like Toys R Us collapsing, that was interesting. And sort of inevitable, because, Toys R Us has nothing to attract you to it, other than the things it sells, and you can get them over the internet much more easily.
Plus, they always had a terrible business model. It just overpriced for things you could buy elsewhere for cheaper.
Yeah.
I never liked... that was the thing. I remember, like, I never liked Toys R Us, even when I was a kid, when I had to go there to get, like, a Thomas the Tank Engine model that I'd lost, and I immediately regretted it because I could have gone somewhere else and just gotten it for way cheaper. It was like people like recently who were kids when I was a kid were saying like, "Oh, I'm really sad that like Toys R Us are gone," and I'm like, "I'm not fucking glad about it. They were shite.
Yeah.
They terribly priced most of their products. They sort of fucked over loads of third party and businesses and suppliers, and they just weren't particularly well run for the last like 20 years.
No. Yeah, I mean, I remember the only Toys R Us that I really went into was the one in Southampton. And it was sort of a running joke in my family that we would go to the Toys R Us every single time we went to Southampton to visit my grandmother.
Yeah.
When we sort of went out to the shopping district to, like, buy some clothes at Marks and Spencer's or buy some books at Waterstones or whatever, we'd go into the Toys R Us and we would never ever buy anything.
Yeah,
because it was just such a joyless experience that didn't encourage you to buy anything.
Yeah.
Whereas, and once again, I'm sorry to bring it up, the Lego shops are expanding while Toys R Us is failing, and the reason for that is that the Lego shops try to make it into a sort of fun experience, an entertaining experience, going to their shops.
Yeah.
Whereas Toys R Us made it the cheapest, most joyless experience possible, and then was surprised when somehow the internet supplanted it.
Whereas like Lego tried to adapt to it, and while sort of also keeping sort of a general base of customization and selling general products, they also.
I mean, heaven knows Lego nearly went under and had to compromise.
Yeah, they still wanted to do that, but they also realised they needed to accept some parts of the internet and also do modern trend sort of products in order to stay alive. And by sort of melding the two sort of sides of the same coin, they have managed to stay very relevant, even to the point where you'd expect, past the point where you'd expect them to go under, like Toys R Us. But it's, again, like you said, down to better management and compromising that they were able to survive and Toys R Us weren't. That, and also the fact that, you know, Lego aren't complete scumbags.
Yeah.
Sorry, I do just fucking can't stand Toys R Us. I never understood their popularity. And that fucking giraffe. No. Sorry.
Oh gosh, yeah, the giraffe.
He used to creep me out. I used to get really upset when I saw him. But yeah, I was going to say, it was like similar thing with my family. Like whenever we went down to I went out to London, me and my brother would always enjoy it more when on our way back we'd go to the Waterstones in Greenwich, which, you know, is still there, the one that's near the Cutty Sark. I still like going there now and just sitting down and browsing a few of their manga and history books while enjoying a black Americano and almond croissant in their upstairs cafe.
Yeah, exactly. That's Waterstones all over. They deliberately made their shops a desirable place to be beyond the products that you could buy there.
Yeah, it's like they allow you to sort of, within reason, browse and sort of borrow to look at some of their books while you're in the store. And most, if not all, of their stores have either a Waterstones cafe or a Costa Coffee at somewhere in the store where you can sit down, have a croissant or a sandwich with a coffee while reading a book. It's like, and, you know, deciding which one to buy. It's like you said, it's just a nice experience, and it's a very authentic book reading experience. And they've managed to survive beyond past the point of paper books being relevant, because on top of continuing their high street retail shops, they've also managed to sort of adapt, again, like Lego, to the increasing online market, and as well as that, the increasing industry of ebooks. So they're able to better fund their retail stores and keep them alive while adapting to further increasing digital markets.
Yeah, definitely.
God, that reminds me, actually, I do really want to go spend some more time in my local Waterstones. It's always a nice experience. There's a really good one, actually, near Churchill Square in Brighton.
Yeah, no, I know. I went there all the time when I still lived in Brighton.
I might go there on like Thursday, actually. Might go and get myself some like lunch or something while browsing some of the books there. I'm not kidding though. They do fucking great almond croissants in their cafes.
Yeah, no, I remember that. No, I always liked sitting down there in Waterstones. I usually went there when my mother and sister came. We'd grab lunch in there, or else just grab a little snack in there while they were shopping, and then we'd grab ourselves a lunch up in the Marks and Spencer's cafe.
Actually, I was going to say as well, before we sort of like start to wrap things up at the end.
Yeah.
I do remember you saying like you had some like cuisine or foodie things you wanted to talk about.
Well, not as such. I mean, I've been fairly tame for the past couple of weeks, but I have had a few adventures. For instance, yesterday I had a very nice cannelloni with spinach and ricotta,
Mm.
and some tomato sauce and cream over the top of that, which I have never made before, but it was pretty nice.
Mm.
And then I also tried various different types of curried thing. For like, this is a strange one. I had a lentil bake with peanuts in it, so crushed peanuts and
Right.
chilies. I mean, you wouldn't have thought that peanuts would really work in there, but they really did.
I can imagine peanuts working in something
Yeah,
spicy.
with sliced potatoes and cheese over the top.
Oh, that does sound weird, actually. But I can
Yeah,
imagine something like with peanuts and chilies working together because, I've eaten a lot of Thai food which incorporates a lot of mixing of things like cashew nuts and peanuts with chili and spices, and it usually comes off really nice. I mean, have you ever tried? If you ever tried Thai green curry with cashew nuts, it is fucking glorious.
yeah. No, I do love cashew nuts. In fact, I'm having a stir fry tonight that's going to have them in it. But
Oh,
mainly, what's been going on over here is because my mother's birthday and mine are so close together, and they're at this time of year. We've
yeah,
basically been stuffed with loads of sweet stuff,
yeah.
as well as admittedly some sort of savoury stuff. Like I made some guacamole for my mother's birthday tea, which we
Mm.
all had with like crackers and various cheeses.
God, that sounds good.
And my mother made me some bean pate that we also had with crackers and so on, which was pretty nice.
Actually,
But yeah, no, we made all sorts of things. Like my mother made me my birthday cake, and it was a Bailey's cake with Bailey's icing.
that literally sounds like the most sort of fill sort of cake I've ever heard.
Yeah,
I
it
think
was pretty good.
I think the only way I could imagine it being more of a U sort of cake is if it had like butterscotch sort of dusting on top, or like it was served up with a bottle of dandelion and burdock.
Yeah, basically that was the only way. To be fair, I did have iron brew with it.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, obviously. But yeah, no. And for my mother's birthday, my sister made her a really big chocolate sponge with the Kinder chocolate around the edge,
Oh nice.
sort of like a sort of ring fence around the edge with sort of sprinkles on the top. That was pretty nice. My little sister likes baking as well.
Hmm.
And I made my mother an apple pie, so I stewed the apples, adding lots of like muscovado sugar and stuff in there, and then I poured it into a sort of pastry pie shape that I had baked for a while beforehand, and then I put it all back in the oven, and then over the top I poured some homemade caramel, which I'd made by putting a tin of condensed milk in some boiling water for an hour or two.
I think I did make caramel once actually on a cooking trip in Wales.
Mm,
I think I've spoken about this before, but
yeah, I think you did.
it was a really interesting experience because we did it more from scratch. We used like hard water with like cane sugar, vanilla extract. We had to sort of like simmer it and add in the ingredients at different levels at different times in a very careful manner. Tried not to
Well,
overboil it. It was a very precise sort of process, but I managed to end up doing it really well and ended up making about like 2 dozen creme caramels.
goodness, that's impressive. No, the most I've ever dared to try is sort of like making my own fudge, my own tablet kind of thing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I prefer fudge myself to tablet. Tablet's all right, but
yeah, I do too. I don't really like tablet that much. It's just a bit too sweet for me for what you get. I like fudge.
I think there's some like Scottish. There's some certain Scottish recipes for tablet which are great, but generally speaking, I much prefer fudge, especially Cornwall butter fudge.
Yeah, it's sort of like I like comparing tablet and fudge to like shortbread compared to like brownies or something like that.
Hmm.
Where like the shortbread is nice, but it's so sweet and dry that you can't have too much of it at any one time.
Yeah, whereas with like brownies, like they're a bit more like sort of like I no, I'm not saying either one is immediately better than the other, but I personally prefer the texture of brownies a little bit more. Plus, you can customize them a little bit more as well. Um, I mean, like I know this sounds bit weird, but have you ever tried like brownies with beetroot in it?
No, I haven't, but it sounds like something I might want to try.
It's actually alright. I tried one once with like beetroot, dark chocolate chunks, and cinnamon in it, and it was actually alright. It sounds revolting, but it's actually not too bad. Plus, beetroot has the added benefit of being quite good for your skin and your blood pressure, so it's yeah, it's actually quite nice.
Hmm. No, that does sound pretty nice. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of any cultural or like cuisine sort of things I'll be doing in the next couple of weeks. I think uh, there was a few things I did over the last few days that were nice. Like last night, I got back home from the weekend at my mum's. We're recording this on a Tuesday, by the way, so I'm speaking about Monday the 13th. So I got back on like Monday the 13th to Brighton, and I was just a bit too tired to cook myself dinner, so I decided to order a takeaway. And I always get chicken dan sak from this particular Indian in Brighton, but I decided to change it up a bit this time by getting a prawn boona, which is kind of like a weird sort of like tomatoey, oniony, garlicky sort of curry.
Yeah.
It can sometimes be spicy, it can sometimes not be. But God, it was good, and it was nice. I mean, I love chicken dan sak, but it was nice to change up a little bit. And then this week I'm going to be making a spaghetti bolognese, but I'm going to be doing it a bit differently this time, because instead of using a tin of like chopped tin tomatoes, I'm going to be using a carton of like nice tins of silky passata, and instead of sort of using beef mince, I'm going to be using 10% fat lamb mince. Slightly more fatter, slightly less gamey, so you could probably say it's a little less suited to the cooking process of spag bol. But I've done it before, and trust me, it works really nice. Plus, I've got my secret ingredient when I make my spag bol of a glass of red wine. So once I add that in, pasteurise it, and then cook the rest of the recipe, I'm going to be very much looking forward to it.
Yeah. That sounds good. For a moment there, when you said secret ingredient, I thought you were going to say love, but there we go.
Don't make me fucking puke. We make a spag bol with love and sugar. Oh, I hate it when people say that. You don't make it with love. You make it with intelligence and passion and sort of good ingredients. Yeah. I mean, granted,
definitely. I've never understood people who say they can't cook. They just don't have the knack. You follow the instructions. It's not hard.
It's like,
there's no sort of intelligent thinking required, really, unless you're inventing your own kind of thing.
Actually, that was something as well. Like when I was at my mum's over the weekend, she said in recent times like, "Oh, I can't cook," but even though she's like one of the people who taught me most of what I know about cooking, and she made dinner on Sunday night, and it was really good. She made vegetarian fajitas, and we had it with like sort of soured yogurt, grated cheese, red pepper hummus, and refried beans. And it was like, basically mixed vegetables in sort of like that fajita mix with some added like smoked paprika and chili flakes. And God, it was fucking good. I had like 3 wraps myself. And she also made a really nice like sort of like dry sort of like salsa, but it was really nice though.
Huh. No, it sounds good.
And it was just like the mixture of flavours together that she recommended was really nice, and it was good to have because it's sometimes nice for someone like, I eat a lot of meat and fish, but it's good for me to sometimes have something that's vegetarian, so I give my stomach a break. And it's good to sometimes eat something that's homemade and not just a takeaway or a ready meal. And it's just like really nourishing. I was like, Mum, what the fuck are you on about? You're a really good cook. This is like just another showcasing of that.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I agree totally that, you can have a talent for doing something, but there comes a point where you can sort of do basically any reasonably simple culinary task when you have the instructions for it.
Yeah. Just don't ask me to cook rice from scratch. I can't do it.
Really?
Yeah, no. Whenever I make myself curry, I always have to get like microwavable rice from like Uncle Ben's or Waitrose or Sainsbury's because I am beyond useless at cooking rice from scratch. I can measure it out fine. I can do the water fine, but the actual cooking process, I am absolute shite at. It's like
Mm.
I've tried to master it as much as I can. People keep telling me, "Oh, you need to practice," and I'm just like, "No, thanks. Either you do it, or I'll just get some microwavable rice. Thank you."
Yeah. And my mother always gets me or my father to test the rice because she thinks we can do it better than she can. But there we go.
Is there
Well, I
any?
think that's a good pace to sort of wrap things up because we've
Is
talked about our usual sort of things and we ended on a pretty good game just there, I think.
Yeah. Is there anything? Is there any sort of like culinary tasks that you're not particularly good at?
Um, Let me think. Yes, there is. I'm not very good at sort of stewing things. Anything that sort of requires a great deal of patience, or something, or not necessarily just something that requires patience, but something that requires a lot of multitasking. I'm not so good at. Like a stew where I've got to prepare lots of different ingredients that require things like peeling and chopping.
Hmm.
I'm very bad at chopping and peeling things quickly and efficiently. It takes me hours to sort of prepare things like that.
I just had this
I
funny.
just don't have the hand-eye coordination necessary to do it.
I just had this
And to
funny.
some extent, I suppose I just don't have the practice.
I just have this funny image in my head of like you waiting for like a potato and mushroom stew to like simmer up and just standing there looking at the pot for like 3 hours and going, "Gosh damn you, you damnable cur! Get in my gullet! I'm thirsty and hungry."
Well, that's certainly what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably slightly better at doing that, but I know what you mean. Like when I've made my beef and ale stew, and I'm just like waiting, like seriously, just get fucking ready already. Like I'm really hungry and I want some of that
Yeah.
stew. Um, but yeah, I think that's probably the best place as possible to leave it. Sorry to everyone at home if this wasn't as extensive a podcast as some of the recent ones, but then again, I think it's good to sometimes have these more light-hearted, lighter tone tapas episodes, as I like to call them. Again, if anyone liked this video, as with any of the previous videos on this series or in this channel, leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you have any ideas for future topics for discussion on the Gitcast podcast, leave them in the comments section below, along with any other ideas for other sorts of videos on this channel, if you have them. And as well as checking out my other YouTube channels and my Twitter and blogspot in the video description below, be sure to also check out Flasher Press's book review channel in the description below, where he now and again uploads book reviews. And yeah, I think that's about as best place to leave it as any. Until next time, stay safe, have fun with whatever you're doing, don't do anything we wouldn't do, and until next time, I've been Gitbag the Great with,
Flash Professor,
and
signing off.
indeed, and we'll see you guys next time on the battlefield. Bye bye for now.
Bye bye.